recording. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is kind of a couple things that are interconnected. So we're going to talk about negative thinking. We're going to talk about positive thinking or positive self-talk, and then a concept that I've addressed, I think, with a couple of you guys, but the idea of neutral thinking. So let's start on the negative side of things. Why is negative thinking or negative self-talk problematic?
Just like within a round, especially, I think, um, it kind of takes your mind off I guess, the task at hand, it, and it's just kind of like, I guess one thing that I've done that's kind of negative is, just say like, oh, like you're not that's not good enough, or that's not good enough, and then it's really hard for you to like, I guess, just focus on the next thing because you're too busy thinking about like, oh, what if this one's not good enough or something like that. So it's kind of like carries over.
Definitely. Osh?
You could begin to believe it, and it's kind of wasted energy. Um, and yeah, carrying over, and it lingers throughout, multiple shots, if not more.
Definitely. Definitely. Um, we know from a research perspective, we know from an anecdotal perspective, without a shadow of a doubt, we know that negative thinking is bad. There's no if, ands, or buts, right? There are a lot of things in sort of the mental side of performance that we're like, yeah, this probably works or this will likely benefit you. The one thing that we can say with a great deal of certainty is negative thinking, negative self-talk is harmful to performance. Okay, cool. So it would make sense then for us to say, all right, if we know negative thinking is bad, well, why don't we just do positive self-talk or think positively? Talk to me a second about why that might be a problem or why that might be a challenge.
I know you and I have kind of talked about this before in the past, and a lot of times, if you're just kind of like trying to build yourself up or something with like positively, a lot of times like you don't really mean it or something like, and you're not, it's kind of like not fair to yourself. Like you don't want to like be out there and doing everything kind of like not very well and just be like, oh no, that was great. Like, cause you're gonna start like kind of your expectations will start going down. And, like, you're not gonna, it just like messes up your whole like flow and everything.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you it's like Derek was saying, you could kind of fake it, but it's not very convincing.
Mhm.
And you know, if you're hitting the ball bad and you say, "Oh, it's okay, you're hitting it really good," that doesn't do anything for you. There's a difference between like getting down on yourself for hitting it bad versus like accepting it and adjusting.
Mhm. Exactly. Alex, you got anything to add?
Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, like Ash said, I think if like you're hitting it bad, you could always say, "Oh, yeah, I am hitting it bad, but at least I'm, leaving myself in the right spots, and at least I'm, fully committed to every shot." Um, like you can't fake it, but you have to find some positive in whatever is going on.
Exactly. And
And
so,
oh, sorry.
oh, go ahead.
I was also just gonna say, like, it might not be true to who you are. Like, not everyone's a Matt Kuchar, or I don't even know if Ricky Fowler, like, he just doesn't get mad, but I don't know if that's the same as positive thinking. Like, he might just shrug it off type thing and not show
Right.
much emotion, but obviously Matt Kuchar, we talked about Webb Simpson, but I think he like gets frustrated with bad shots, and it's not like, I mean, obviously Matt Kuchar does too, but I think Webb Simpson's like hard on himself too, but he's good at being hard at himself on himself in the right way.
Definitely. Definitely. So, with all of that being said, positive thinking is beneficial, right? We know that if we can get you onto the positive side of that sort of spectrum, it is going to be beneficial. But as you guys brought up, it's not that simple, right? Because if I have negative thoughts for any number of reasons, me just simply saying, all right, I'm going to think positively, or I'm going to act positively, or I'm going to act confidently, it might not be able to happen, right? You might not actually feel confident. You might not feel positive. You might not feel optimistic. And then if I tell you, hey, still do it, well, then it feels fake. It feels phony. And anytime you're disingenuous like that, it's hard to fully buy in. So this is where sort of the concept of neutral thinking comes in. And what I'm going to do before we kind of jump into it is I'll give you kind of an overview on it, but then I'm going to play a little clip from one of the guys who kind of came up with this concept. And he's a performance coach who's done a lot of work with like some NFL teams. He's done some work with like college football programs, but his biggest sort of claim to fame is he's done a ton of work with Russell Wilson, the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. And so his whole premise of neutral thinking is, hey, reducing negative is more valuable than increasing positive. So his whole idea is, hey, the reality of the situation may not allow us to be positive. So if we can at least remove the negative from our equation, we're going to improve our performance. He'll kind of go over a little bit more of what that means, but that's kind of the premise is let's try and at least get to 0 instead of be in the negative. So let me see if I can get this to work. So bear with me for just 1 second. All right, share. Okay, right there. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
All right. All right, let's see here. Perfect.
Usually when you hit share screen, it'll, oh, okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Perfect. So here we go. So listen, and then we'll kind of discuss it in a moment.
So I had a chance to read your upcoming book, It Takes What It Takes, coming out in February. And in that the book, you talked about a concept, neutral thinking.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So neutral thinking was this idea that was really built in large part at the University of Alabama. You know, our first year we got to Alabama, people forget we were 6-6, and the culture was filled with so much negativity. And so if you just kept telling people, hey, be positive, be positive, be positive, it didn't ring true. It didn't make sense. So one of the first things that we started to do was, well, where does the mind really have its most influence? And when we think of positive versus negative, what's really the strongest? And what we found out was that negative thinking and negativity in general were by far more powerful than being positive. So if you were equally negative to equally positive, that equally negative would outweigh the positive as 7 did to 1. So what we started to realize is, what if we could just minimize the negativity without really focusing on the positive? And we've realized the carrier of negativity is language. When I'm talking about, I don't want to be here, it's hot, man, we can't beat Louisiana Monroe, how are we going to have a chance against LSU? Whatever the situation, that language becomes really powerful. So the first thing you have to do is learn to stop. What if we just minimize negativity? What if we just stop saying stupid shit out loud? So the first step to being neutral is learning how to minimize negativity. Now, the second thing is you can't just not do your way to being successful. Neutral is this idea that the past is real, okay? So what people really struggle with positive thinking is the state that you're at, this negative, difficult state, never happened. And you have to just pretend it didn't happen and you move to this positive outcome. Neutral thinking says, you know what? That happened and it was bad. However, the past is not predictive. What happens next is based upon what you do, not what has happened. And so it's this combination of what we call behavior-based thinking, that I focus on the next behavior and not what has happened. So a neutral thinker is somebody that instead of thinking about outcomes, we're not going to worry about outcomes. We're just going to be a better version, and hopefully the outcome will change. So it's the acceptance of the past without bias. It happened, it's real. But what happens next is totally based upon what we do, not how we feel.
So stop that share. Shut this off. All right. So I'd love to hear your guys' perspective on that.
I thought it was really good because it was, very process oriented. It wasn't anything based on results. Like he, accepted his past, but that wasn't what he was focused on. He was focused on improving himself. Improving his inner self rather than, focusing too much on results.
Mm-hmm. What else?
I found it interesting that he mentioned like you have to just accept the past, because a lot of times when I kind of think about, I just try to stay as much in the present as possible, but I guess like he said, there's sometimes you have to acknowledge where like, oh yeah, like this did happen, even though you might want to forget about it. You have to acknowledge that it actually did happen before you can begin to move forward. Like if you played a bad round like yesterday, then you have to like kind of acknowledge what went wrong and figure out how you can improve on that before you can actually start the process to improve. So yeah, I thought that was interesting.
What about you, Ash?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, the acceptance was kind of what we're talking about before, but I like the part about the past not being predictive of the future, and I kind of see that as like there's some positive in that neutral thinking, because you're saying, like cheer up in a way. Just because you were doing bad doesn't mean that's going to affect your next shot.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the other, like the acceptance part was kind of like it's intuitive in a way, and then I think like the past not being predictive of the future is something like you have to, like another level of that acceptance that you have to like work on.
Mm-hmm.
Or I have to work on.
Definitely. And the couple of things that really jump out to me there is, one, words have meaning, right? I think sometimes we forget that the things we say to ourselves, whether they're said in jest, whether they're said kind of off the cuff, like they have meaning. And the more we say them, the more we start to believe them, right? If we say, hey, there's no chance that we can win this game, how the hell do you think that you're going to win a national championship? Or how do you think you're going to win a golf tournament, or any number of things, right? And so I really like the idea of, honestly, the first thing that we have to do is stop saying stupid shit to ourselves. And I think that that's something that can be beneficial to everybody, right? The idea of, all right, let's just stop, right? I know that this situation may be bad. I know that this may not be exactly where we want it to be, but how is saying something to reinforce that making the situation better? So again, eliminating like negative vocabulary, I think, is huge. Then the other part, right? The past is real. As much as we want to try and ignore it, as much as we want to try and forget about it, or everything that happens in the past is going to theoretically influence where you're at presently. Now, it doesn't have to define the future, but it certainly is getting you to that position. And so understanding that the past is real and acknowledging it. What's interesting is there's another clip that I've seen where they're talking about like a football game and, being down 2 scores with 2 minutes left in the game, right? The sort of stereotypical like negative thought is, oh, well, there's no way that we can win this game. Okay, that's a normal thought sort of in that situation. And then how would we reframe that or switch that into a positive thought? Oh, you know what? We're going to find a way to overcome this. We're going to find a way to win this game. We don't have the ball, but we'll find a way. All right, that feels a bit hokey, right? That doesn't feel like something that we can fully buy into. But what if we approach it from the perspective of, yeah, you know what? There's 2 minutes left. if we make a play or if we somehow score, we have a chance, right? You're focusing on the behaviors that are going to potentially lead you to success. You're not guaranteeing yourself success. You're not guaranteeing the outcome that you want, but you're giving yourself an opportunity, right? The same way that you guys get off to a bad start during a round, right? Maybe you bogey 2 of your first 3 holes. Yeah, you didn't play those 2 or 3 holes very well, but that doesn't mean that it has to be predictive for the rest of the round. Understand, hey, that did happen. Here's what happened. How can I move forward from that and try and start hitting more quality golf shots? Thoughts?
No, I completely agree with that. And the part about neutral thinking, that I think I know you and I have talked about this in the past, but one part that I don't think he mentioned it or whatever, but that I just heard from you was like you said, like, oh, maybe we can make a play. Like you don't want to think about the result, because when we've talked about it in the past, neutral thinking is kind of more based on fact rather than like opinion based stuff. So you want to like take in the things that you kind of know that can happen. Like you don't know you're going to win or you don't know you're going to lose. So you kind of want to eliminate the kind of vocabulary from your thinking. But and like just start kind of like you said, like this, like you don't know a play is going to happen, but you know you can make a play. You don't know you're going to win. You don't know you're going to lose, but you know you can make a play. So just try to make a play, and whatever happens, happens. So you just kind of want to get the things that are kind of based in fact, kind of thinking about it first. And I kind of like that perspective to it.
Completely, right? Removing sort of the biased thinking, removing some of the biased perspective, right? You're saying, hey, we're just dealing with the facts here. Yeah, I'm 5 strokes back with 5 holes to play. It's going to be hard to win this. It doesn't mean that I can't win this, but it's going to be really, really hard. And so what can I do right here, right now to change my circumstance, to change my situation, right? This is just reframing of a process-oriented approach, right? You're approaching the process from a slightly different perspective. Now, for you guys, how do you think you can integrate this, and where do you think that you might run into trouble trying to approach something neutrally?
I think kind of.
Go ahead. I don't think I would really have a problem integrating this, because it's less overwhelming than like positive self-talk, right? Like, because I feel like when you're at neutral thinking, you don't really have to make that big of a jump. You're really just optimistic about the future. You're not like that the future is going to be better than the past. Really, that's what it is, I think. Right? Is that what neutral thinking would be? Is that you're just optimistic that you are going to get better out of the situation no matter what, even if even if it's not right at this instant or whatever that is.
Yeah, it might not be entirely that, but I think that you could definitely make an argument that, hey, the neutral perspective is certainly looking forward and trying to give yourself a chance to succeed, whereas negative thinking definitely is like, all right, I'm putting a end on this, and there's no chance that I'll be able to succeed in this.
Yeah, there's the only thing that might be a little difficult is this isn't really kind of for me, because I don't really show a lot of emotion like when I'm playing golf and stuff, but I know like a lot of players like to ride kind of like emotion and stuff, and I feel like neutral thinking is like not really based on emotion very much. And I think a lot of guys like might think like, oh, like if I can just get like some momentum or something, or then I can get back on track, then they might not like consider like, oh, like the facts. Like if you're 3 down with 3 to play or something, like you might just say like, oh, let's make like a little play and give me my momentum. But if they don't get that momentum, they're gonna kind of like not be able to think in the right manner, I think, like neutrally and like within facts and stuff. So that might be hard, but I mean, like Alex said, I don't think I'll have a problem kind of integrating it, because it's kind of like he said, like I like the more process approach to it and less result. And it kind of just gives you a little bit more of hope, like for the future, I guess.
Definitely.
And
What about you, Ash?
Yeah, I think it definitely fits my framework the best. So I feel like I've been working pretty hard at, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, we talked about that one-on-one.
Mhm.
And I feel like I've made progress in it. One kind of aspect that's difficult is if you continue to, if it's one of those rounds where you're just not hitting it well and you continue to hit it poorly, just adjusting, and the whole past isn't a predictor of future success idea. Like if I've hit several bad iron shots in a row and I've got, an iron shot that's maybe not the easiest shot, just getting myself comfortable over the shot, knowing that pass. I think that's kind of the hardest part for me. Even if I'm not like caught up in that previous shot emotionally, I might still be mentally and just focus wise.
Mhm.
But I feel like I've made a lot of progress in that, in neutral, as far as neutral thinking goes.
So it's interesting that you bring that up. Sort of the idea of, you know what, sometimes the past feels like it is a predictor, right? Where, man, I've hit like 5, 6, 7, 8 loose shots in a row, just doesn't feel like it's going my way. Um, Whenever that sort of question comes up, I always try and ask my golfers, I'm like, well, how many good shots do you think you've hit in your life? Do you think it's more than 50% of your lifetime or less than 50% of your lifetime shots have been good?
Are you asking me?
I mean, this is just a general question to everybody, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer based on what you guys do collegiately.
Yeah, I mean, I would say they're more good.
Or good, right? Same with Alex, same with Derek. Heck, probably even me. I'm not great by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like I've probably hit a fair amount of good shots in my life.
Hey, I
So,
mean, I've heard stats like I think it was like 90% of golfers like can't even break 80. So I mean, if you're one of those guys who can like break 80, I'd say it definitely that at least 50% of your shots are
I think it's 90% can't break 100.
really.
It's definitely not 80.
Yeah, it's not 80. It's like, yeah, I think it's 100.
Jesus.
Yeah, so that's crazy.
I
So when
mean,
you think about it
there's
like
the truth
this,
though. Like,
any shot that you hit, regardless of every shot that's happened before, you got at least a coin flip that it's going to be a good shot, right? At worst. So while it's kind of a silly thing to think about, at least you know that, hey, I have the chance to jump in there and hit a quality golf shot.
I have a question on that. So, like for me personally, I feel like that in a way, it's definitely a good thing to think about. I feel like that might be kind of along the lines of positive thinking and tricking yourself in a way though. Like if you're just really struggling that day and thinking about, okay, I've hit a lot of I mean, it's obvious that you've hit a lot of good shots in your life, but I feel like that day you're kind of you have what you have that day, and yeah, you're a good golfer, so you could you could definitely pull off good shots, but I don't know, because that kind of goes along with like it's in the I'm not saying like good shots in the past are, you know, they're not a part of you as a golfer, but I'm saying like it's kind of the same thing as a bad shot in the past in a way. Like do you like, I'm not trying to, because I don't think I'm a negative thinker, so I'm not trying to say this in a negative way, but I just feel like that is hard to do. What you're saying, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do. I'm saying
No,
it's hard to do.
so I understand that. The way I look at it, I don't necessarily look at it as a sort of, hey, that's me trying to be super positive. I feel like that's really non-biased, right? If I'm just looking at the data points throughout my career, the likelihood is I've hit more good shots than bad shots. So
Okay.
theoretically, if that holds true, that should be the case on any shot that I hit. So if there is discomfort, if there is frustration, if there is emotion, I can fall back and say, yeah, I have hit 4 or 5 bad shots in a row. And all of those shots still have value, right? They still exist. I can't change that. That being said, I've hit as many good shots as I have bad shots. So there's no reason to believe that I can't hit a good shot in this place, right? The same way that, hey, we're down multiple scores, but that doesn't mean that we have to stay down multiple scores, right? We just have to focus on this one and forget about the impact of those prior ones. Does that kind of make sense? Does that kind of
Yeah, I was thinking more. Like in a trying to cheer your like motivate yourself type way rather than kind of factual way.
Yeah, no, definitely. Good question.
And I think that it kind of builds off each other, because if you said like, hey, I have a 50% chance at hitting a good shot, like if say you don't hit a good shot, and then your chances, if you think about it, go up of hitting a good shot in the future. Like that's a little like positive-ish, not really neutral thinking, but I think you can kind of build off of it to be a positive thinking. Like I think neutral thinking is more of a temporary thing until you can grow on it and build momentum to be more positive. That's what I'm kind of getting from it.
Maybe so. I don't know that it has to be one. I definitely think that there is a momentum piece behind it, right? Because it's like, you know, if I can take one step forward, then maybe I can get 2 and 3 and 4, right? The idea of neutrality is getting us back to that present space, because the killer with that negative thinking is it gets us out of that present space. We're focused on either the past or we're focused on the future. We're not focused here and now. At least if we're neutral, we are focused here, now, what I have to do behaviorally in order to try and give myself a chance to succeed in this moment, right? So it's difficult, right? It's not as simple as just saying, oh yeah, like just eliminate negatives, right? Like that's why kind of looking at just the bare facts very analytically can sometimes help, because yeah, sometimes the reality of the situation doesn't feel good. You know, the reality of the situation hurts. It emotionally hurts. But if we can look at it almost as like a third party or like a third person perspective, then it's like, all right, yeah, it takes some math, it takes some outside thinking there to get to that conclusion, but at least we're now focused on right now and what we need to do now to take that first step. Because really, what's the whole idea behind momentum, right? How do you build momentum? You have to take one step in order to get that train moving. It may take a couple of steps to fully get behind it, but you got to take one, right? You have to change that culture. You have to change that thinking process. You have to change that mentality in order to start that momentum process. All right, so we got about 7 minutes left. Any other questions on your guys' mind? Any other thoughts on your minds?
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty related. Have you watched The Last Dance or at all?
I've watched the first 7 episodes.
Okay, so I've been watching that, and obviously you can learn a lot from that and Michael Jordan's mentality.
Mhm.
And I know everyone has like kind of a different mentality. It seems like Tiger, Jordan, they kind of have more of like a super competitive killer instinct type mentality. But I was like, they're so serious and focused. And Jordan obviously was kind of portrayed, as kind of, in your face type leader. Like he'll call you out and everything. So I don't think of him as like, or I wouldn't think of him as like a super positive type person. Because when I think of positive, I think of Matt Kuchar, not
Right.
like Tiger Woods. So I want to get your thoughts on Jordan was saying like, oh, he's an optimist. And I saw two different kind of reactions to him losing games in a series. One would be after the game, and our coach, like my St. Mary's coach, would say, "Oh, you guys played bad. Why are you so like, cheery? You shouldn't be happy right now," type thing. And Jordan said, "Oh, I wouldn't eat any like I would starve myself on the airplane." And I've legitimately done that myself. Like I wouldn't eat dinner in the past, like if I thought I did bad.
Mhm.
And then I've seen the approach that, he was saying, oh, we lost the first game, they're down 0-1 when they were the favorites. And he was saying, it's just one game. It doesn't matter. That's in the past. So I've kind of seen two different approaches to him. And I was wondering more so kind of that first approach, not necessarily like that extreme of an example, but kind of how, like what you think is a good mentality to have, like after, especially like on college trips when you're with your teammates, your coaches. If you guys have a bad day, it's hard to be like super cheery, but how do you be like kind of frustrated in the right way?
That's an excellent question. Hell, shit, I feel like we should just talk about The Last Dance next time, because that thing is incredible. It's
awesome.
It's amazing. But to answer your question, I think the most sort of valuable aspect of Jordan and sort of how he carried himself is he always understood that failure is a part of it, right? He understood that if I could learn from it, if I could grow from it, it served a purpose. So to answer your question about, all right, the first approach, right? I'm going to basically like feel bad. How is that helping you the next time around?
I don't know how it is, but I was just like, because that's something done in the past that I thought was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw like Michael Jordan saying he did it. Obviously he you think of him as someone who doesn't make mistakes, emulate his approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I was saying like how he was doing that versus like how other people would do it, or like how he'd still focus.
Was it earlier in his career or later in his career? Do you remember?
It was a more recent episode. They keep going back and forth.
Yeah, they kind of jump back and forth. So maybe I haven't seen that part yet. I just know that because there was one thing that kind of stuck out to me was they lost a series to, I think it was the Pistons. This was before they actually won their first championship. And he said something along the lines of, you know what? We didn't play our best game, but we kept it close. And so that actually gave him sort of satisfaction, or it gave him enjoyment or excitement for the next game. I feel like if you can take a mentality of that where it's like, all right, you know what? We didn't play this tournament as well as we would have liked. And yeah, we're not going to be happy. So maybe I'm not going to be like joking around with my teammates in the car, or maybe I'm not going to be, super cheery or happy on the plane ride. But I don't think that there's a benefit really in sort of punishing yourself for doing something poorly, right? From a purely behavioral perspective, punishment is usually not super constructive to future behavior, right? If we think about reinforcement, and this is like super like basic psychology stuff, there's positive reinforcement, there's negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is if you want somebody to do something more frequently, you add something to it. So maybe you give praise, maybe you give, food, money, whatever it might be. Negative reinforcement is you take something away, right? But it's not necessarily something good. It's going to be something like, hey, normally we have to run wind sprints after practice if we screw up. Well, if we do really, really well, we remove that wind sprint. So it motivates me to do that more frequently. In the punishment piece, like you not getting food, that's not a positive. That's not a good, right? So you have to be very careful with the things that you choose to remove, because ultimately that's reinforcing a particular behavior and saying, I don't like that, or I don't want that. So kind of a long-winded answer. I don't know if I fully answered it for you. But here, why don't we do this? We're going to talk about MJ next week. So MJ, Bulls. So bring questions. If you haven't started watching Last Dance, I would highly encourage it. It's fascinating. And if you need anything from me, shoot me a text, give me a call. And I thank you guys for showing up again. You guys are awesome.
Baseball.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You guys.
Thank you.
Take care.